Welcome, everyone, to this 30-minute session between myself, I'm Sarah Hutchinson at Yoga Beyond the Poses, my friend and colleague, Dr. Brad Rachman, who will introduce himself in a moment. We're here today to share with you our knowledge and wisdom and inquiry about the time-honored practice of detoxification and cleansing for our physical bodies. We're going to go at it with both a physiological and, if you will, a spiritual perspective, hoping to answer your questions, fill in your knowledge about this time-honored practice. So welcome, Brad. We're thrilled to be working together. I'm here in Colorado. You are in?
South Carolina, right on the coast.
Beautiful. Welcome. I'm so pleased that we're able to offer this together.
Me too. I've been looking forward to doing this for a long time with you.
Do you want to start by introducing yourself?
I do. Would you, if you don't mind, I'm going to put up a slide about it a little bit.
Yeah.
I think it'll lead us into this notion of detox, because my whole life for 40 years has been dedicated to help people to find the underlying root cause of their health issues. And I know that seems like what every doctor should do, but in reality, most doctors are spending a whole lot of time with the tip of the iceberg and not the bottom of the iceberg. The tip of the iceberg is the stuff that patients come to me with: heart problems and autoimmunity and body composition issues and things hurting and breaking down and not doing well. And what I see and the vision that I have is that there's usually something underneath it, one or more things that aren't working well, whether it's inflammation or whether it's something structural or a toxic emotional imbalance or a hormonal imbalance. And this fits in really well because detoxification imbalances wind up somewhat at a nexus, at a center point of a convergence of a lot of root causes for patients. When I fix that, a lot of other things tend to get better. So just us thinking about us in a toxic world is incredibly important, because I think especially those of us that have been aware that we should be eating cleaner food and we should be drinking cleaner water and we should be breathing cleaner air, I think there's a gap in our knowledge that even with some of the best practices, stuff still gets inside, that we're still hurting. And it's way better to understand these things and accept where we are in this world, which is a toxic place, and then do some strategies occasionally, quarterly, seasonally, to help us get ourselves out of the pickle that we've created by doing what we've done to the world. And if you just think about the amount of toxic air emissions, like I saw a map recently of where I am in South Carolina. It's like, what I would have never told you. On the coast of South Carolina, I'm 5 steps from the beach, that it's a toxic air polluted environment, but the whole eastern seaboard is in rough shape, as well as concentrations on the west. And we're talking about almost 5 billion pounds of stuff in the air all the time. 72 million pounds are known carcinogens, things that cause cancer. And just the jet stream, if you think it's just the United States, it isn't. It is the jet stream around the world, and it is constantly moving 100 metric tons of garbage from one country to the other, and it's just circling the globe as a big, like Saturn's rings, that are moving toxins around. Coal-fired power plants, which still exist quite heavily in the east, we have 20,000 pounds of mercury and sulfates and nitrates in the environment. And every breath that each of us takes, on average, we have 5,000 gallons of breath going into our body regularly. And that means that those breaths are breathing in a certain amount of toxin that we need to pay attention to. Our soils, where all of our food is grown, unless you're growing your own and being meticulous about it, there's over 4 billion pounds of garbage in our soils, and therefore our foods are impregnated with all of these things. And our surface waters are quite impure. You have 260 million pounds of toxic debris in our water systems. Those are our public water systems. Food additives, I think many of us are trying our best to eat as cleanly as we possibly can. But, the average American is consuming 124 pounds of toxic processed material every year. That's hard to imagine, but it's true. And the average body carries with it about 91 toxic compounds out of 167 known toxic compounds. And the body doesn't know what to do with the toxic compound. I think there's the thought that we are like a tube where there's like a hole in one end and a hole in the other. Oh, if you eat some things that the body doesn't want, it just goes out the other hole or more. But it's not true. Our human evolved internal machinery has only been around for 20,000 generations. That is not a lot of generations. And therefore, our ability to learn how to get rid of things has evolved over those 20,000 generations. But all of these chemicals have arisen in what? The last 100 or 150 years. So our biology and our genome hasn't caught up with I'm going to coin a new word, the xenome. It hasn't caught up with the xenobiotic environment that we've created in the last 3 generations.
Brad, I just want to come in here, and I am surfing this with you and with all of you because it can be overwhelming. One of the things I would just like to introduce as you continue is my background as I'm a registered nurse, almost 50 years. Right away, I began to be curious why some people got sick and other people didn't. I began to observe the human condition. And when I found yoga to reduce my stress, I also found Ayurveda, which is yoga's sister science, which was innovated by the rishis, the seers in ancient India. And I found Ayurveda to be so very helpful in backfilling those places in modern medicine where we might not have clear answers. Places like insomnia, anxiety, places like this. I started out, and I just want, my audience knows, many of you know this in my audience, but I just want to come in now and say, I started out offering Ayurvedic cleanses that were taught in the traditional Ayurvedic style. And I was happy to do that for a number of years. But after a while, I found a couple of things. I found a lot of people not being able to digest, for example, the khichdi, no matter how carefully we spiced it. I found myself and others not feeling really clean at the end of these cleanses. And I felt a little embarrassed. Maybe I'm doing it wrong. Like, this is an Ayurvedic cleanse. Why don't I feel fantastic? And you're really answering that question. And that's what I discovered when you and I began working together on my health and restoring my radical health and being. The Ayurvedic cleanses were designed in a different era for a different population, living under totally different conditions. All of these slides you are showing us now, the rishis probably could see that was coming, but the average person was like, what? No, we're just gonna get hydrated and eat some khichdi and we're gonna feel better. So the point of me sharing this is to point out that my background is in Ayurveda and Ayurvedic cleansing. And when you first invited me to detox in the way that you're going to describe today, and in the way that I'm inviting my audience to detox, you said a very simple thing to me. You said a cleanse takes the trash to the curb, and a detox is the trash truck coming to pick it up and dispose of it. And I was like, oh, the Ayurvedic cleansing was taking the trash to the curb. But it was like New York City when the trash workers are on strike, it was just piling up. The trash was not being taken away. And hence the effect of the cleanse was not satisfactory. I am not criticizing Ayurvedic cleansing. I'm simply pointing out my experience and also landing your very contemporary, brutally honest depiction of this world we live in and why we may have toxic loads that were unimaginable back in the day when Ayurvedic cleansing was innovated.
And those principles are absolutely still true of how to go about this. But they also, as you said, never took into consideration all of this garbage that did not exist as Ayurvedic cleansing was evolved, how it occurred. So I'm hoping that this approach smacks of both of those things, that it gives a feeling of acknowledgement to the incredible wisdom that developed over thousands of years, and then an acknowledgement that in the last, 3 generations, we've filled up our bodies with a bunch of things that it's just not used to dealing with. And food isn't the only element. If you run a tap water local quality report on your water and you're getting water through a faucet that isn't from your own well, you're going to see your water provider, the public service provider, say everything is fine. The results undetected, but they don't tell us that they're going by these things called MCLs, which are maximum contamination levels. They don't tell us that those levels are different than health guidelines. And if you do a real water quality test, you're going to wind up seeing things that are over the health guidelines. And when I tested the water for Black Mountain, North Carolina, it came out 10 out of 10 being great. But when we went ahead and did the real water quality, it came out 3.5. That is crazy. We are not getting the right information about our environment. We're not getting the environmental straight scoop. And it isn't just external environment, because people talk all the time about what's in the external environment, but I find that there's 1,000 times greater contamination in our internal environment. We've got radon, and we have mold, and people using cleaning products and dryer sheets and fresheners and microwave plastics. And the internal environment is just filled up with things, especially, believe it or not, furniture. Like the newly furnished homes have unsafe levels of benzene gas. 70% of them do.
Yeah.
And so it's coming just from the off-gassing of all the garbage, non-natural, synthetic, petroleum-based products that are in our home.
Yeah.
Personal care products, it's hard. There's known carcinogens across all these. And we are constantly putting on pills, potions, powders, and lotions all over our body to try to look better. But I think the best look comes from the inside out. But still, what we're using is quite toxic. Perfumes, 250 different toxic elements in them.
That's exclusive of something like an essential oil, correct?
Correct. And then, depending upon your lifestyle, caffeine and tobacco and alcohol and recreational drugs accumulate over time, as well as medicines, necessary or otherwise. We still have to detoxify. And I consider amalgams a form or medicine that was used to heal a hole whenever there were caries that got removed. And the significant off-gassing of heavy metals and the removal of the and the exposure of the tissues in the body to heavy metals like mercury, and it's the gift that keeps on giving. You've got basically 10% of pregnant women with elevated levels of mercury. So it's sad. It's scary. I think most people think toxicity feels like something specific. I don't feel toxic, or I've heard somebody say I feel really toxic. But because toxicity affects all of these different organ systems, it can feel like and manifest in one person differently than another. It could be more cognitive in one person. It could be more inflammatory in another. It, across the board, will change our health span, which is not going to meet our lifespan. It's not going to meet that goal of attaining healthy longevity. It isn't just how long we want to last. We want to last healthfully.
Yeah, and again, I just want to pause for a moment, because this language, I believe, is so important. Maybe some of you listening have heard it, perhaps you have not, but we talk a lot about a lifespan. I came of age in the medical system looking at average lifespans and talking about longevity. And now we have, and that's fine, but if we went to a nursing home right now on a little field trip, we would see people with long lifespans. Would we want to be them? Most of them, no. No, and I think this is another conversation, but everybody knows what I'm speaking into, which is when we use the word health span, that implies that our health is intact and our quality of life is meeting our meeting us in the way that we wish to be while we're in these bodies. And when that health span is over, done. Please don't keep me alive just to have a long lifespan. So I really appreciate you bringing in this languaging, Dr. Brad, of health span. I hope we'll continue with that.
It reminds me of George Burns' famous quote that he said, "If I knew I was going to live this long, I would have taken better care of myself." And it sounds paradoxical, but it's so true. It's poignant. It's really super poignant.
And that's exactly why we're talking about this practice. So we can have a health span with a quality of life. And let's see, vibrant longevity equals health span.
Completely. For some individuals, toxicity impairs the metabolic mechanism. So the only thing they see is an accumulation of inflammation. They feel bigger, and they use the word bloated sometimes, but they also are experiencing higher and higher levels of body weight, or they feel all sorts of gastrointestinal issues that are coming from the toxic activity, or they just are shot mentally. They have lost the acuity. They're just not able to maintain frontal executive function the way they used to. Or there's migrating inflammatory aches and pains in all different tissues, but they're in one place one week and one place another week, and it almost feels like everything's breaking down, but it's the body. Headaches are another really common symptom that come about from toxic accumulation, as is mood impairment. To feel an inability to access your joy, to feel an inability to be motivated, to feel an inability to have mental and cognitive resilience. Those are all signs of this, as well as memory loss is a huge one. High sensitivity to environmental toxins. You would think that the person that went into a big box store and had to turn around and come out was somebody that was protected from toxicity, but it usually means they have no mechanism of removing all of the formaldehyde-based smells and petroleum-based smells that are in those big boxes. Circles, darker circles under the eyes are sometimes that, as well as a really significant or foul odor in your mouth or your armpits or your feet. And skin irritations like psoriasis and eczemas can be related.
And this is obvious, and you don't need to put us on full screen, but many of these things, we know this, myself and my audience. Dr. Brad, you go to your doctor to say, I am having this experience of this skin situation, maybe even this malodor, these headaches. And this is beginning to shift, but a traditionally trained physician is going to say, they might spend a lot of time and money trying to figure it out, but I think we all know often they're going to come up with no explanation. So these are these non-specific illnesses that detoxification benefits so deeply.
Tremendously. And not the least of which is hormone dysregulation, because all of these toxins are known hormone receptor disruptors. And what I mean by that is that there's a lot of talk about hormones. Do you have enough hormones inside your body? Are you taking natural hormones? Oh, I'm taking a natural hormone. And what a hormone basically is doing, whether it's coming from your body or from another source, is it's touching a cell, it's touching a receptor and making something happen there. It's making bone grow, it's making the heart stronger, it's making digestion occur. Hormones make things happen in the body. And these weird molecules get into those receptors and compete for those receptors, which means when they slide into the receptor, there's an altered response than there would be if the real hormone got into the receptor. And it's all of these myriad ways that the body is really encumbered by toxicity that has evolved 5 different organs of detoxification. Our body has lots of organs of detoxification, lots of ways of getting rid of stuff. The liver is the primary quarterback in all of this, because every bit of food, every bit of smell, everything that's in your bloodstream is washed through the liver. But then the liver says, look, some of this is fat soluble. I'm going to put it through the bowel. It mixes it with your bowel material and out it goes as a fat soluble substance. It will take some of it and put it out through the skin. because that's one place that we get rid of water-soluble toxicity, as is our urine through the kidneys and our lungs, which is also water-based toxicity. When any one system is unable to detoxify, another will take over, which is why when the lungs aren't working, the skin will take over. When the skin is impaired in its detoxification, the lungs will take over. But that sometimes creates an overburdening. When the liver doesn't work well, you will push incredible toxicity to the skin or to the bowel or to the liver and or to the lungs. Or you will store toxicity in your fat or your organs or your muscles, weirdly in your bone, which creates inflammation, which creates bone loss.
Wow.
Most of us don't know how toxic we are.
Yeah. All right. This question I am going to leave hanging for a moment. We are almost to our first segment limit, which is this 30-minute limit. And I want to honor people's schedules and attention spans. We are not done. I want to ask you, Dr. Brad, a few key questions to wrap this session up, and then we are going to go on to a second 30-minute session that will expand it even more. Does that work for you?
You bet.
Yeah. So again, for my audience, as you can see, I've got a really big fish on this line in Dr. Rachman because of his ability to look under the hood. You just saw him do it when he looked at how toxic our world is with these beautiful slides and this depiction of what we already know, but presented with such clarity. Now he's gone on to describe something so key, which is the endocrine disruption. Disrupting the messengers of the bodies. I call the hormones the messengers that are going around taking messages. And when you disrupt the messengers, it's like not having the mail be delivered. You don't get your bills, so your electricity gets shut off. You don't pay your credit card. The next time you try to buy gas with it, it's declined. This is what happened in my body. And this is why I found Dr. Rachman, and he and I worked together personally on my health, and we continue to do that. As we wrap this session up and look forward to the next one, the aim here is to guide you into a 10-day cleanse that I will be working alongside you on. It's part of a 30-day experience, a month-long fall rejuvenation experience in this instance. We're making this recording in the fall. We are part of nature. As the summer gives way to fall and the fall heads us into winter, this is a perfect time to reset and to detox. Our bodies are noticing the shorter photo period. We're exhausted, most of us, from summer, and it's a perfect time to rest, reset, and detox. So, Dr. Brad, in a short amount of time, can you describe your experience of the many clients that you have recommended this 10-day cleanse to, keeping it real for people who may, or detox, keeping it real for people who may not have detoxed? How do we get to carry on with our regular lives? How much is it going to disrupt my family, etc.? Do you mind just bringing that in for us?
Yeah, for most individuals, it's an intentional action that requires more effort than normal day and not as bad as people fear. You have to be intentional. You have to invest in your health.
Yeah.
So there's some dietary change, probably not as bad as you fear. There's some other practices and some elements of detoxifiers that are helpful to take. And it's easier than people think, by far. Nobody has ever told me this was completely overwhelming and unable to be attained. They said the opposite, which was it was easy once I figured it out.
Yeah, what do you?
It was easy once they figured it out, and it was one of the more powerful things they ever did.
Yeah, and I just want to pause here that it's easier than you, once you've got it figured out, it's easier than you think it's going to be, and you will figure it out for yourself and your lifestyle. And when it is complete, you're really like going through the tape at the end of the race. Not that the cleanse itself, the detox itself is a race, but you're feeling that podium beneath your feet, that sense of, wow, I did that. And I'll just say that I just completed a 10-day cycle of this detox that I do regularly for reasons we'll continue to discuss. And I was able to make some key decisions. Like many of you, I have key decisions floating around, and I'm not quite ready to make that yet. And gee, I need to make that decision. And often that's when I will enter into a detox cycle. And coming out of this detox, I made 3 big life decisions that had been on my shoulders for quite some time. And it was not hard to make because my load was lightened. My messengers are delivering the messages to all the places. And this intelligence, and we'll just close with this, Brad, this intelligence that you mentioned before we began recording was restored. Will you just say a few words about that as we wrap this segment up?
The most sensitive organ in the body to toxicity is the brain. And it is the physical representation of the lens through which all of our internal energies focus to create conscious awareness of the environment that we're in. And that lens, when you get it clearer, when you wipe away the dust that you're not sure is there, it's like when I take off my glasses, I'm like, how did I see all through the day? When you take that dust off of the lens of the mind, there's quiet and there's clarity. And there's perception and insight and intuition.
Beautiful. And I just want to close with that because my work, I combine what I call science. We all know what that is. Science has saved my life more than once, saved my oldest child's life. I'm a Western medical professional. I love science. And sometimes science isn't enough. Sometimes there is this, what I call a spiritual component. You just named it consciousness. We can call it what we will, this 4th dimension that comes in and awakens, allows us to experience innate intelligence. And that's when the decisions get made. That's when life gets easier, even though it's still hard. That's when that dimensionality comes that gives us the joie de vivre. I know you were just in Europe, so there's joie de vivre. And I just want to close with that because this is a technical process, this detox. And yet it's also, and help me out here, Brad, it's also a function of consciousness, a function of our spirituality, a function of something bigger coming in.
And I think we manifest our intentions, right? So if our intention is to get rid of what is no longer helpful for us and those things we've accumulated that are no longer necessary, that can happen on every single level. It can happen on an emotional level during a detox. It's a great time to get rid of what we don't need physically anymore, and certainly what we don't need as false identifications that our mind is engaging in.
Yeah, it's a way to evolve ourselves on so many levels. So yes. I know there's still some information to be covered. And in our next session, I hope that we will also have some Q&A. I've got some questions coming in from my audience. Again, Dr. Brad's going to focus a lot on why do we do this. I'll cover the how. That's my job as your guide. But I think finding here a healer and a medical professional, I call Brad my favorite scientist and healer combination, who can really get under the hood and explain to us the deep physiology and then the consequences for our mindset, our consciousness, our intuition are also present. So thank you very much, my friend.
Thank you.
Lovely. And I look forward to our next round.
Me too. Bye.
Okay. I'm Sarah Hutchinson, Yoga Beyond the Poses. You can find me online at yogabeyondposes.com. Brad, where can they find you?
Rachman Clinic, Rachman, rachmanclinic.com. I'm
going to put that in the chat for those who are still with us. I'm going to put rachmanclinic.com. So this is where you can find Dr. Brad Rachman, who you've been listening to. And I bet you don't really need this from me unless you're sharing this because you're already in touch with me. But I'm at yogabeyondtheposes.com. And together, we're creating the synergy to give you the why of detoxing, the wisdom of pivoting at the seasonal transition. And if you wish to enter the program, I'm there as your guide for the how do you do it. And one of the main ways we do it is we detox in community. That doesn't mean we're all going to travel to Fiji and sit around and detox together, although maybe someday. What it means is we have a virtual community, so you're not alone during this process. Regular phone calls to check in, a community forum, and all the ways that we stay in touch virtually so that you're making this part of your journey in the company of others, which we know is always more delightful and successful. All right, to be continued. Thank you, Dr. Rachman.
Thank you. Bye, Sarah.
Thank you, everybody.